And welcome to this week's IGTV. Today I'm talking about how compliance and control will not change behavior. No matter how hard you try to get your tween, your teen, your young adult in line to set them up for success in life and what's going on in the real world, greater compliance to your rules and expectations and greater controls like consequence and punishment will not change their behavior. In fact, greater consequences and compliance for control increase conflict. That's the one outcome I promise you will get, is increased conflict. And I'm going to go through why and where our thinking is around this whole behavioral and the psychology of learning to break it down for you to, I'm hoping, give you a few different options. Research-based, evidence-based, science-proven options that actually are going to create more of what it is you're trying to create, but in a way that is way less conflict, way less damage in your relationship with your teen, but you actually get what it is you're looking for. Okay? All right. My name is Allie Payne. I am a certified life coach, certified relationship systems coach, one of only 70 people in Canada to hold both designations. I have been working with parents of tweens and teens and young adults for the last 16 years to help them end the painful disconnection, baffling blow-ups, and stressful silences to build open, honest relationships with mutual trust and respect that last well into adulthood. Excuse me. I want to thank you so much for joining me. If you're here on Instagram, I'd love a follow. If you're on YouTube, I'd love a subscribe. I am going to walk you through a little bit of this and give you a little bit, a little bit of some direction at the end. Okay, so this is probably one of the greatest, I'm actually not kidding you, in 16 years and in the last 3 years going fully online with my business in the pandemic, this is one of the greatest questions, challenges, concerns that I get from parents of tweens and teens, no joke, is my teen is acting out, my tween is starting to act out, because it does start then, because the hormone hijack can start, anywhere around 8, 9 years old, especially for girls. Boys, it's starting earlier as well. My teen is acting out, and my job as a good moral parent is to teach them that that is not okay. Because a police officer pulling them over at 25 years old is not going to be all like, oh, I'm sorry, we're having a bad day, we're just letting you off the hook. No, the police officer's not going to do that. Their boss is not going to say, oh, I'm sorry you didn't get that assignment done or that task done on time. Would you like an extension? My job as a good parent is to teach my teenager what's right and wrong and take some responsibility for their actions so they actually can be successful in the real world that is not there to pander and coddle them. And this is what so many parents write to me every day. Every dang day. These are the kind of comments that I get, desperate, frustrated, at their wits' end comments that I get from caring, courageous, loving parents who truly do want the best for their teenager and are doing everything that they know how to create that. I got no shade, no shame, no nothing. If a parent is willing to reach out to me, they're already my kind of people. Because if there's one thing I had to learn in raising 2 kids, my oldest has autism spectrum and ADHD, it was to take a little bit of a humble pill. Because maybe I didn't know it all. And maybe what I was doing, which is exactly what I'm talking about, is greater compliance and controls to get more, get them in order and teach them like how to be a good human. What I had to learn in that process, in all of my coach training and certification, and years of research in the brain to help my son, because I did not get any of the support that I needed and help in raising him, was that just maybe what I had learned from generations, from my parents, and they're not bad people, okay? From generations of thinking was just maybe completely off board with what science and research has shown us in the psychology of the brain. Just maybe. When I say this to parents, I barely get this first sentence out of my mouth. And they're like, yes, but the police officer is not going to coddle and pander them, so I can't. So what happens is, again, here's the situation. Your teenager or tween is starting to act out. They're not doing basic things anymore, like they're refusing to clean their room. They're having emotional blow-ups when you ask them to do basic things, like clean their room. They are starting to backtalk, get a little bit moody, rude, a little spicy, maybe, blame everything on you, or they're just completely shut down. They refuse to engage, but they're still not doing what you ask, taking out the trash. They're refusing to do homework after school, or even help put the dishes away. It's just so opposed to the values under which you are raising them for the last, say 10 years in your home. And now all of a sudden, this creature, AKA your child, that seemingly overnight a switch flipped. And it's like they're a different person. And they're pushing back, and they are defiant, and they are acting out in ways that are not going to get them anywhere. So they need to figure out, pardon me, but how to get their shit together, because they need to succeed in school. They need to get a job. They need to be able to operate within the law. And this kind of emotional mess is not going to work. So this is the kind of thinking that we come to parenting with. And then, crazy ladies on the internet like me show up and are saying something different. And the first thing that gets triggered in your brain is the fear of, yeah, but this whole gentle parenting BS, I'm not going to coddle and pander my child because no one else will. And what I'm doing is going to set them up to fail. If I pay attention to those emotions that they're having, or if I acknowledge those emotions they're having, or if I make space for all that emotional mess, then I'm going to be part of the problem as a parent, because I'm going to raise a snowflake, an entitled brat snowflake who thinks that their emotions, their emotional things are just an excuse for not taking responsibility, for not doing what you're supposed to do. And I am a good parent, so I'm not doing that, Allie. I totally get it. I hear you, and that's okay. Here's what it looks like. Your teenager or your tween, maybe your tween, your teen, starts to backtalk, right? And you're like, oh, no, we don't talk to each other in that house. No, you go to your room and till you can figure out another way to say that to me, because that's not okay. Because as a good parent, you are raising a child who understands how to speak to authority, right? Totally. So now your child goes to their room, right? Or let's say you ask them to clean their room and they either flat out refuse or give you some kind of emotional blasting enough to melt your eyebrows, or at least laminate them, that is also not okay and not cool. And your thought is, I'm a good parent. I am not raising a child who's going to speak to authority that way. So you will clean your room. In fact, you give me your phone and you're not coming out until your room is clean. Because your job is to raise a good human. And maybe they're skipping school. Maybe you caught them smoking weed. Maybe they are refusing to help around the house. And they're just giving you nothing but pushback at every turn. So you start screwing the vise a little tighter because they need to understand to listen to authority. So now they're grounded. Now they're grounded. You've got their phone. You've taken their gaming. They're not going out with friends because they're going to understand what it means to do what they're asked and respect authority. Because you are a good parent and you're raising a good human. This is the thinking that you and I were raised in. This is the thinking called behavioralism that was created in approximately 1920 by Dr. John B. Watson, Yeah. And it was disproven by 1960. It was not only disproven as psychologically ineffective to change behavior via means of control, to increase compliance with authority via means of greater consequences, greater control, in order to feed your need to feel in control and your own internal belief of being a morally good and proper parent and raising a morally right and good human. That these needs for greater control that focus purely on the behavior itself. You see the behavior you don't like, you elicit fear via means of control, consequences, punishment, elicit fear in order to change that behavior. That is a method of parenting, behavioralist, that was created in 1920, disproven, and actually in 1960, by 1960, and has actually also been shown to create emotional trauma, to actually be unethical. That because what happens when we were raised this way, and I say this with deep compassion because I came from this, okay? I came from this too. Like literally, I got no shame, no shade, no nothing. This was a generational thing that fortunately we have other science to prove. The reason that we use control and compliance to change behavior because of our own fear. It challenges our own fear of what a good parent is. And it challenges our own expectations and fear of not raising a morally good child. Morally an upstanding and good child who respects authority. So here's part of the problem is that compliance and control are actually not respect. If you look up the definition of respect, respect is to hold someone's values or talents or intelligence in high regard. Consequences and punishment do not have your child hold you in high regard. Continued consequences and compliance to do what you ask to respect authority is enforcing control to change behavior out of fear of losing control. That's it. It's out of fear of losing control. So, I understand that you already are a good parent. Can we just put that on the table and leave it there? You already are a good parent. And I understand that you want to set your child up for success by having them respect authority. Totally get that. And they are going to learn that at home from you, right? So that's what you're trying to do. Here's why it doesn't work. Because the brain does not learn from control and compliance. The brain learns from encouragement, direction, natural consequence, and adjusting. And that doesn't happen. In fact, it is scientifically proven that the developing executive function in a tween and teen brain, which by the way is the second and final brain growth phase in the human lifetime, one of the largest. Their executive function learns by failure. Now you're thinking, oh yeah, Allie, they failed. They failed all right. When I say clean your room, you're darn well gonna clean your room. I get that, okay? But their brain learns by their own experience of, well, this isn't working. I need to fix this. And then you might say to me, well, Allie, if I don't get them to clean their room, they're never gonna clean their room. Maybe. I know a lot of really successful people who lived as though their room had been hit by a Category 5 hurricane when they were tweens and teens, but are now really upstanding human beings in community and in the world that are quite compliant with laws and rules. The other problem with using control and compliance to change behavior is that you're looking only at the outcome, the behavior, and you're trying to elicit fear in your child because of your own fear of losing control to change that behavior. So it's a transactional thing. Oh yeah, you do this, then I'm gonna do this. Oh, you do this, then I'm gonna do this. And you end up in this game of whack-a-mole with your teenager, trying to change the behavior. So here's what science in the last 2 decades, 3 or 4 decades, has shown us, is that all behavior is driven by emotion. 100% of behavior is driven by emotion. Now, the reason most parents do not want to pay attention to emotion is because of the instant reaction. I know you just said it in your brain. I am not going to coddle and pander to my teenager. I am not going to let them think that their emotions are like this whole great thing and why an excuse for not doing what you were asked to do. I understand that. Because acknowledging emotion can feel really scary. It's not linear, it's messy. It feels like giving up authority. And because you and I were not raised in an environment where we were allowed to have emotions, at least anything that wasn't happy, shiny, sparkly, pleasing, and compliant, you and I don't have as much comfort level with the full human experience of emotions that your teenager or your tween is actually having. So here's what I want to give you is a what if. What if there was a way to actually teach your teenager mutual respect and compliance for authority and rules, reasonable rules, okay? With way less consequences, because compliance and control increases conflict. Period. I don't know if you've tried that in your house, but greater compliance and more consequences to change behavior will increase conflict because it is a forced change. It's like trying to swim upstream. It's a forced change, and any kind of forced change is going to get you more conflict. Conflict, which leads to consequences and more punishment, does not teach anything. That is not how their brains learn. So what if, hear me out, what if you could change your tween or teen's behavior long term with less conflict and actually less need for consequences because you paid attention to their underlying emotions that created the behavior in the first place. But you weren't pandering, coddling, and you still were the parent. Like you weren't trying to be their bestie or a pushover. Like what if? This is actually the definition of respectful parenting. Is that, you see, also I think what happened back in when behavioralism was developed and is still very pervasive in the world today, is that as parents, we were sold a lie. You were sold a lie down the river. You've been sold down the river. Number one, you were not taught actual relational skills. Neither were your parents or their parents, okay? Number two, you were not told or taught of the massive brain renovation that's going to go on with your child in the tween and teen years and how it actually changes their personality. And that it doesn't mean that they are a defiant, broken, bad apple of a child. It means that they're normal, going through a physiological process that they have no control over, and P.S. no one told them was going to happen either. And number 3, you were also lied to because you were not told that your parenting that did work for like 8 to 9 years, which your child probably was more compliant, and the way you were parenting did work. Why? Because they had a simplistic brain, and that's how they learned. They learned in a more transactional, simplistic way. So the parenting that you're like, well, Allie, you're full of crap because everything you're saying I shouldn't do and doesn't work, it did work. And I have proof. And you know what? I believe you. I believe you. It did work for approximately 8 to 10 years. And this is what lulled you into this sense of that will still work. But you are not parenting that brain anymore. It's an apples and oranges thing. And so that's why when it doesn't work, when you hit that around 10 years old, and all of a sudden your tween and teen start to become someone that you don't even know who they are, and it's like they shifted overnight and you don't even like them. You go back to what worked for the first 10 years. Why wouldn't you? It worked. Because it worked for that simplistic brain. It doesn't work as a teen tween. And if you think this is a phase that you're just going to slap a smile on those gritted teeth and pretend that your shoulders aren't up in your ears, but everything's just going to go back to the way it was after, I have a very, very hard truth bomb for you. Their brain is not going back to the way it was. Their brain is forever and permanently changing. For necessity, biology, for them to be an independent, successful human, and missing this opportunity to change your parenting with the brain they have and the brain they're going to have is what will erode connection, communication, trust, and respect, all 4-cornered anchors, pillars that are necessary for any healthy and successful relationship into adulthood. And I don't think that's what you want. I really don't think that's what you want. Now, at this stage, most parents are still saying to me, but I need to teach them how to manage, that they can't live in an emotional world because the police officer at 25 years old is not going to say, oh, I'm sorry that you were feeling bad. I won't arrest you. And like, maybe this was okay. Yeah, I get it. I get it. So again, what if you got greater compliance and more respect by actually acknowledging the emotions that drove the behavior, even if it's how you weren't raised, even if it feels awkward and weird, and even if it actually feels really, really scary because it's challenging what you believe you were told and is true and necessary as being a good and moral parent who maintains control and compliance in their own home, because that's the only way to raise a morally right and good human. It's going to challenge all of that. Now, what if I also told you that there was decades of scientific research to show that this is actually acknowledging the emotion behind the behavior is actually what is how their brain learns? When you can address the emotions they're having, or at least know how to make space for those emotions in a healthy way, not a critical or condemning way, that is then how their brain can then learn about the behavior you're attempting to teach them, so that they're more likely to do the behavior you're attempting to teach them with greater respect. But then you need less control. And because you went at this from the source of the behavior, which is the underlying, the source, not the outcome, which is the behavior, you actually created more mutual respect in your family with your tween and teen. And the relationship had, because of that one aspect, improved communication, easier moments like some laughter, some levity. You needed less consequences because you had more connection, but you were still the parent, and you knew, and you set and hold reasonable boundaries. And then you had this relationship into adulthood. So you actually got what you wanted. You got a morally good and right human without needing all of the conflict because of the consistent control and compliance that you were told was necessary, but is in fact the one thing that is eroding your relationship with your teen. It's not because you're a bad parent. It's because we were given wrong information, and so were our parents. Again, that method of parenting was disproven in 1960. But if you think about when your parents were raised and when your grandparents were raised and what they learned and when they learned it, it makes sense, right? That it's still going through family lineage, that old way of thinking. It totally makes sense. It's nobody's fault. I'm not here to blame anybody. But I am going to tell you the truth. I'm not going to drown you in the white papers to prove it, but I'm going to send you an invitation instead. So here's my invitation to lowering conflict in your house, to feeling less resentful, less disappointed in your teen, because let's face it, when the less compliant they are, the more it challenges what you believe about you as a parent, feels disappointing. Your teenager's not being who you want them to be. And worse, maybe they're not even being who you believe they can be. That triggers all kinds of fear in your brain. Like so much amount of fear that drives what? More need for control and compliance, unless you know other tools. So I only run this program like twice a year, tops. With me, you get me, okay? 8 weeks of live group Zoom calls with me. You can also get 8 weeks of me direct messaging, like every single day, all day on your phone. It's like me having on your shoulder and in your pocket for 8 weeks. I am running the Empowered Parent Mastermind. It starts on Monday. If you type mastermind below this, once I get it posted, give me a few minutes, I will send you a link. It's only valid until Monday. It's limited time. This is a limited number of people. And I am doing this, and I do this because I was a very troubled teen. My parents did what they were taught as well, not because they're bad, and they're certainly not stupid. But the more control and compliance they put in on me to attempt to get me in line with zero acknowledgement or room for my emotions or my behavior, or little did they also know I also had ADHD, which was undiagnosed. They were set up to fail 100 times over. Our relationship eroded significantly because they were never told this information. And I don't think that being a teenager needs to feel that hard, and I do not think that being a parent needs to be that hard. But this is going to take something from you. It's going to require you to challenge what you were told about parenting. It's going to challenge you to look at your generational beliefs, which I help you unpack and unfold. That's module 1. It's going to require you to not be wrong, because I want to be real clear. My programs are a zero shame space. Zero shame. I have zero tolerance for it. If you do that to any other parent, you're out. We all came to this with misinformation. And I think that takes a great deal of compassion and understanding. To be with a group of caring and courageous parents who all came to this with misinformation and are frustrated enough and have tried everything they've already heard on social media and podcasts and books, every piece of generalized content they've ever heard, a lot of it good, but it's not specific to their situation, so they've tried it, it didn't work, and they're at their wits' end with how to get their teenager to shape up before they ship out. Know what I mean? So if you are a caring and courageous parent who's willing to not make your teenager the whole problem, but also not blame yourself, to have some compassion in this learning process and know that what you were taught and what your parents did with you isn't actually going to work, and it won't work with teenagers, especially now because they're being raised in an environment where emotional intelligence, and so because of social media and bullying and all that, is even more required than when we were raised, when we had like magazines and TV shows that didn't interact with us. Okay? You're not looking for a quick fix, because there isn't one. But you want a little bit more personal attention for 8 weeks with me. And you also get 6 months access to my private parenting community where I'm there like every single day supporting you. Then I just want you to type mastermind in the comments below this, because the program starts on Monday and it won't run again until, I don't know, sometime next year. You don't need to feel angry, lost, at your wit's end, frustrated, really unsure whether you and your teen are going to have a relationship, and more unsure whether your teenager is ever going to actually stand up and be a successful adult and fulfill their potential. You don't need to feel that. You don't need to feel that gripping fear that then results in greater control and compliance, which only creates more conflict and isn't working. All right, I'm going to post this type mastermind below if you'd like the link. Again, it starts on Monday, the Empowered Parent Mastermind. All the information is there. And if you have more questions, you can also just reply or post questions under this. I believe in you and I believe in this program. And I will do this until my very last breath, because you deserve to get correct information, proven tools and strategies, all backed by science that have helped thousands of other parents of teens to create a more connected, open, honest relationship based on mutual trust and respect with your teenager. And you know what? Your teenager wants it too, because I have teenagers message me all day long as well. All right, I will see you on Monday in the Empowered Parent Mastermind. Bye, everybody.